Let me see.
Just to let me know whenever you're.
Recording has
Good now?
started. Yep, we're good.
It is 7 o'clock and I'll call this meeting to order. We have a quorum present with one member absent, Ms. Otto. Going down the agenda, item number 2, approval of the minutes, consideration and approval of the April 11th, 2024 minutes. Christina, thank you for chairing that meeting while I was out. If you don't mind, take a minute to review the minutes and let us know if there are any requested changes. If we are all comfortable, is there a motion to approve? It's been a motion. Is there a second? Being a second, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. I'll also note that the March 14th minutes have also been reprinted due to a typo in the date. We have a copy here. Does anybody want to see it, or are we comfortable signing it off and moving on to the approving the text? Perfect. Yes, I'll hand you the formal copy that way.
Yeah.
There's the March ones. Next, item 3, citizen comment period. Are there any citizens wishing to speak? Seeing none in the room, we'll continue on. Item 4, reports and presentation, library director's report. Jessica.
Perfect. So we had our May fine forgiveness program, and it wasn't as large as the one in November, but it's still effective. We had $762.49 direct fines, 49 cents of direct fines forgiven with food donations. Each canned good that was donated forgave $2 worth of late fees. And if you're wondering, why does it say 49 cents? Whenever you go to forgive someone's fees, sometimes there's cents involved. And so that's where that 49 cents is coming from. Then there were $98 that were pay it forward. And so there's a total of $860 of fines that were forgiven. So successful. And then for library personnel, we are going through the restructuring process. We were able to successfully reclassify our library circulation clerks to library assistants. So that's exciting. We have promoted 3 positions internally. They're the youth services specialist, teen and adult services specialist, and lead library assistant. And then we are going through the interview process for these positions. And once the candidates are selected and they accept, these would be promotional reclassifications. So that's exciting. And then we had interviews this past Tuesday for a library director, and someone was selected. And so now it's in HR's hand as far as offering them the position and negotiating all of that. So hopefully, I don't know the timeline, but once I do, they'll give me like a heads up and we'll be able to share the news once I have more news. But we're moving forward. And then the children's area. So the painting is completed. And since I've made this presentation, the carpet is completed. And we now have it decorated as just a quiet, cozy reading space. Y'all have to check it out. Judy, Nikki, Shannon, and Roxas are the ones that painted it. And so there's a dragon in a cave, a whimsical tree. It's just really magical over there. And we have a table and some cushions set out to encourage families to read together. So check that out. And those steps are long gone. So we have some library projects we're working on. One of the big ones right now is our DVDs. So historically, the cases would be on the shelf for the patrons to pull. They would bring them to the front desk, and then we have this little filing system where we would pull the actual DVD and put it to the case. It is a very time-consuming process. DVDs still get lost even with that process. And so after kind of evaluating our process and talking to the staff, we decided to go ahead and put those DVDs back in the cases. And so that way, when patrons go to check out, they can go to the self-checkout, they can still check out with us, but it eliminates that extra time of us having to find those DVDs. We are aware that there's a potential of some of the DVDs going missing, but when we kind of compared it to how much time goes into putting these DVDs back in the cases, it was minimal. So that's our big project. And we have a pause on accepting book donations just because we use the meeting room to store those donations. And during the summer, we can have 200 people in this meeting room. And so trying to carve out space for book donations is not feasible right now. But once summer ends, we're going to reevaluate accepting those. And our heritage room, we're currently converting it to a conference room. We're actually calling it a shared learning room. And so the reason for this is because eventually we want to be able to use that room for library programs as well. But we have a lot of groups that are constantly looking for a space to just meet up for a quick meeting. And so we converted the heritage room. We're converting it to a shared learning room because it's already being used for that already. And the heritage collection, what we did is we, Jesus and Mary, they looked through it. Things that could be added back into the collection were added back. Things that needed to be weeded or weeded. Other items were reaching out to other organizations for like the Hayes County Free Press, like those older newspapers, to see if there's other organizations that would be willing to take those, because we don't want to just get rid of historical documents. So we're still trying to navigate that. Anything we would keep, we would put into the quiet room because there is space to store documents like that in the quiet room. It also just makes more sense because it's the quiet room. And if anyone wants to look at that, there's space to do it there. But then the heritage room will be renamed to shared learning room.
The heritage room, the one that's like that back corner of
It's-
the library.
That's the quiet room. So it's the one before that.
Okay.
It's between the director's office and the quiet room. People are always going in there for small meetings. So we took out the big conference table and we put in 3 round tables to allow like shared space. So
Are you only gonna make that first serve or still like?
for right now, we're thinking first come, first serve. Eventually, we're wanting to maybe add another calendar where people can reserve it, but we're struggling internally with these meeting rooms and keeping up with these calendars because there's like a glitch with Microsoft that we can select one of these rooms as like library meeting room A, but it's not showing up on the meeting room calendar. And so we're trying to fix that before we make it open to the public, because ultimately our goal is for the public to be able to see the meeting room calendars to see when they're available. So when they go to request it, they have a good understanding. But until we can figure out that glitch, we didn't want to add another meeting room that they can reserve. But that's the goal. The goal is for it to be reserved. And then we are going through our policies. We have the library card policy tonight, and we're going to have the circulation policy ready for the July meeting. That's what we're hoping. Questions or comments?
Hearing none. We will move down the agenda. Probably lost my packet. Next on the agenda, item 4, I'm sorry, these are not one numbered properly. Either way, next item, consideration approval of the library card policy. Jessica, you want to outline the proposed changes here?
Yes, so we went over the policy a couple, when was the last time we went over this policy as a board? It's been some months, but when we formed the committee, it was one we wanted to reevaluate just to make sure that everything that we talked about as a board was actually can be applicable with the staff and it's something that we can actually implement. One of the things we noticed was we had the digital cards and the digital cards, though we have the best of intentions for allowing people that aren't able to make it to the library to get a card, what we noticed is that there was no way to verify their identity and their residency. And then trying to add that extra step of the only way to do it was for them to email us their ID or to email us proof of residency. It became like a security issue. And so we went ahead and took the digital cards out also because the only thing that they would have been able to access is our digital content. And that's the most expensive collection item is our digital content. So we thought if anyone's wanting a library card, they should come in anyways because we need to be able to verify their ID and verify their residency anyways. And there's just no safe way of doing that with the digital cards. And
Can you remind me, why do we have to verify identification?
so we know they are who they say they are. And we want to verify residency to make sure that we're serving the citizens of Hayes County.
It's tied to the funding mechanism.
Yes, tied to
Okay.
the funding mechanism, because we are supported by Kyle taxpayer dollars, and then we do get funds from Hayes County as well. And then right now, we just noticed that with the digital card, we have people from outside of the city and outside of Hayes County that we are giving library cards to that might live closer to Dallas or closer to Houston. And it's just not fiscally responsible for us to be issuing cards to citizens outside of Hayes County and Kyle. So and we wanted to clean up the language around youth cards. And so we basically try to make it as simple as possible there's 4 types of cards. We have a resident card for those living inside of Hayes County, the non-resident card, the tech share card, and what we added was an educator library card. So this one is new. When we were talking among the committee, we were talking about potential cards that could be useful. And one that we've seen in other systems is the educator card that teachers are allowed to get so they can check out materials that they can use in their classroom or if they bring a field trip and they're wanting like each child to have that library experience of selecting a book and checking it out, they can get the educator card for that. And there are different limitations for the educator card, but those would be brought up during the circulation policy. And we wanted to establish the youth resident and youth non-resident, because originally it was presented as like a separate card and the language wasn't very clear. And we were just trying to make it as like, you have resident, you have non-resident, and if it's a adult, this is the way, and if it's a minor, like this is the way. So we just added the youth aspect under both types of cards. And we did add a policy. We did add a paragraph about renewing cards because the original policy didn't have that little paragraph. So there was a paragraph added about renewing cards in the process for that. Everything else we kind of pretty much like didn't mess with. We kept the valid accepted photo identification. That section stayed the same. The valid accepted proof of residence, that section stayed the same. question.
Two items for you.
Yes.
On the educator card, and knowing this is a new card type that
Mhm.
we don't have experience with.
Yes.
And if I understand right, we're going to be discussing in the circulation policy next month,
Yes.
the parameters of what benefits that type of card will allow.
Yes.
Can you just speak broadly in terms of what's the intention for that educator card and
Mhm.
why should that be different than a resident or non-resident?
Yeah. So I'm going to speak on my experience from when I was at APL and we issued a lot of educator cards. And so we would have teachers that would reach out having a particular curriculum. And so let's say like, hey, I'm doing a lesson on space, right? And they would come and check out space books. Well, because it's a 25 item limit for the cards, if they're using their personal card to it can max out. It can max out that 25. And so adding this card allows them to not have to use their personal card and use those checkouts for their job or for their curriculum.
And so in theory, an educator could have a personal resident card and an educator library card
Yes,
for personal and then professional use.
yes.
Then my second question is seeing the distinction down on the types of identification. So there's the types that are the photo IDs to identify that the person who presents that identification form visually is the person whose name is tied to the ID. And then we have the residence verification. So in theory, if I came in with my driver's license, that accomplishes both.
That accomplishes both.
And is the intention here that that one ID satisfies both items at the same time, and therefore you're going to have two different types of identification? Or does the ID card satisfy one of these two, and you also have to have another document type for the other category, so it still is two data points?
No, that identification card would, if it has your current address, address, it would satisfy both residency and the photo identification.
I think that language isn't clear to me, at least in that top paragraph. I don't know, I'm just alone in it.
Which paragraph?
The applicants must register for a library membership in person, by completing a form and presenting accepted photo ID and proof of current residence. And just thinking in practice, this was a few weeks back, my
Mhm.
wife came in to get her card. She had to have two different data points, and it could be that was the old policy, and so there's some to be
Mhm.
two, and then this is going to clarify to be only one. But that
Mhm.
was a real life example of where I could see this going of an implementation. Does this need to have one photo ID and one end of
Mhm.
residency? And that's two document types,
Yeah.
even if one item could satisfy both.
So right now, the procedures, because they're procedures we're operating on, do state that you have to have an additional form of residency, proof of residency. It's like it clearly states that. And so we are trying to take that language out where if you read it, it's like, hey, all we need to see is who and where, like who you are and where you live. But right now, our procedures clearly state that we have to see proof of residency, two forms of proof of residency and ID.
If somebody is coming here for photos for school or whatever, they want to keep their out-of-state driver's license. But they're ready to.
Yeah, they can bring their lease,
I think there's
utility
a
bill.
lot in here.
Because we do see a lot of patrons that come in that haven't changed over their license yet. And so they still have their out-of-state license and they'll show us some bill, a lot of times car insurance.
think to legally change your address to owner ID in certain Pennsylvania ways.
Yeah, not for the student.
Your permanent address is where your permanent address is, and then you have a student.
That have that, the students are the only ones that are legally supposed, that don't have to change their ID, their driver's license.
Jessica, is the language for the educator library card intentionally vague in terms of what you're defining as an educator? It's not limited to public school educator, it's not limited to K-12. For me, like as a lecturer at Texas State, am I an educator? If I went to get books like for my students in my class, can I do that?
It is vague in the sense because we were trying to think about homeschoolers as well. And so it's basically if you bring that proof of employment, an educational institution, doesn't matter if it's higher education, it still would count.
So anyone who works like a preschool,
Mm-hmm. And we did think of preschools when we were talking about this card because we go and we do outreach to different preschools and if we start taking the bookmobile out and these daycares want their kids to have that experience, they would at least have that educator card where they could check out books from the bookmobile.
I guess I'd be interested in reading like reading some policies that people use for this, because I'm assuming when you say it's a separate card than their personal card, I mean, there's obviously going to be lots of books. Because I was a youth services librarian and we served a public school and the children who came in had their own cards, you know, it was all the time, like they're all the time they took books. Like, so I guess like in anticipation, like of us saying like, okay, yes, this seems like a great idea, this educator library card. I guess it's kind of hard to say like, yes, this seems like a great idea without knowing like, what does it actually mean? Like, does it mean we're saying, okay, like I have a homeschool, I have my educator card for my homeschool, which is my children, and then I use my educator card. Am I not like responsible? Is there a different level of like responsibility, fines, et cetera, on the educator card than there is on their personal card?
It would still be the individual whose name is on that educator card. They would still be responsible for everything checked out to that card, on that card.
And they would just have more books that they could check out.
Yes. It can be something that we can revisit and I can bring it back to you in July with more details. Because we were modeling it, well, we got it from like Austin and we're referencing the Austin model. Because I've seen it work there and it was pretty successful with whenever educators needed materials for the curriculum that their school didn't have. They could also access our digital collection as well with their educator card. But if we need like clearer language or just like if you're wanting more details about it, I can definitely bring that to you in July.
I think it's cool that it's going to be open to more than just like, public school teachers. I just wonder if it might be, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if people would be reading this and be like, oh, it's not me. I work at a preschool. It's not, I don't know if people are going to be pouring over this policy like that, but if it is open to that, I don't know, it might be nice to say, like, this is open to preschool teachers, public school teachers, and maybe you could put, and other education professionals, if you wanted to like leave some space there.
Okay.
Yes, I don't know. I don't feel super strongly about that, but.
And of course, we're working in the abstract of it doesn't exist currently. We don't know what risks could exist in the future. We're speculating a little bit. But to your point, it might be helpful if under that second section, the registration of the library card and account, we have a delineated list of things that qualify for photo ID, things that qualify for residency. We don't distinguish what is a proof of educator card. And would that be a helpful criteria of, to your point, Jessica, of bring your employment letter, or bring a letter regarding that you are running a homeschool, like something along those lines that tries to flesh that out in a way that the staff then know what to look for to verify that you are an educator versus just a arbitrary, the guy behind the desk felt like you said, yeah.
Okay, yeah, because we have like proof of current employment affiliation, and so more like wanting like an actual list,
And that
kind of
might
like pay
fit
stub, current,
Format
like.
wise, better with that proof or what you need to have versus
Mhm.
embedded within the type of cards. If we don't do the same delineation within the other
Okay.
types of cards, kind of breaking that out and giving it more definition of, it includes a lecture at Texas State, it includes a
Yeah.
homeschool, it includes whatever criteria we do and don't want to include inside of it. And then it might be helpful as well to see this side by side with that circulation policy to see in
Mhm.
practice, it would do this in comparison.
Okay,
I want to give you time and space for us
Yeah.
to talk about this, but then I have another point if we're done, when we're done.
oh no, I made that note, that makes sense, we can,
I guess I wanted to revisit and talk a little bit more about eliminating the digital library card and
Mhm.
the rationales that you provided for that make a lot of sense to me. But I do have some concerns about limiting library card access to people who can physically visit the library. And of course, I'm sure you all thought about like people who live in nursing homes and people just who don't have mobility, who don't have transportation.
yeah.
And yeah, I have some concerns about that. And I just wonder if there's any way that we can consider those people's right to access the library. I mean,
Mhm.
especially, if they live here, they're paying taxes and everything. I don't know. I do worry about that. And I think that library access can be really important, especially important to people who aren't able to go out into the world for whatever reason or to travel here. So like, is there, I don't know.
We did talk about that, and we talked about how there's always exceptions, right? And so we're always willing to make exceptions for people and their circumstances. Also, with our system, we're allowed, like, our system isn't just, it doesn't operate just in this building. It is cloud-based, so we can go to nursing homes, and we have done outreach where we've gone out and we can establish getting library cards there. So when we do like school visits, we can issue library cards there because our ILS is web-based. So there are ways to because this was something we were like, oh, accessibility, and we want to make sure, but just the way our system doesn't support us getting proof of ID and proof of ID and residency in the system, and them having to email it to us. We don't want to establish it as a card type because that just creates, the process it wouldn't be a smooth process for us, and it's also just not secure. But like I said, there's always exceptions, and we're willing to make that exception. Accommodations, yeah. Especially when we have the bookmobile, and that's going to be one of the things we're trying to accomplish with the bookmobile is getting out into the community and making it easier for people to get library cards.
I wonder, like, knowing that
Mhm.
in terms of the policy and ensuring that citizens have access to that knowledge,
Mhm.
is there some language that could be included that says something like residents who are unable to visit the library in person should contact this
Mhm.
number or something like that? And then as the outreach librarian and position is like evolving and the bookmobile, like if I know you can't like probably write something that's like we'll come to you, like.
Yeah.
Knows or something, like, I know it's not gonna be like that, but if someone maybe is living somewhere where they can't get here and they can't get here, like, is there a way for that to be something that the outreach librarian does in like a limited and bounds thing is like, go to them. I don't know. I'm just kind of like brainstorming because I think that's really awesome, but not everyone will call and say, oh, like there's just people who are not like, hey, can you make an exception? Can you make an accommodation? Like it would need to be written, that
Yeah.
you make accommodations. Please call us if you cannot come to the library. And I know we don't want people to just take advantage of that, but I don't know. I'm just wondering. I know other people may feel differently. But I just wonder if that might be something nice to add.
I know it's not out of both, but I agree fully with you. My only caveat would be to expand calling to just contacting, because maybe there's somebody who can't call for some reason. The main thing is having a contact point. And I also am very uneasy with there being exceptions, that we don't say there's an exception in the policy. Because if a policy is set, it should be adhered to, period. If there's a problem with the policy, then the policy should be fixed.
Yeah.
And having an unspoken to exception, while probably appropriate, we can codify that. I would feel easier.
We can reevaluate and see how we can add a line or two addressing that.
Yeah, and because this language at the second sentence of the policy isn't even true, right? Because it says right now, applicants must register in person at the Cal Public Library. That's not true. Like you can register at market days, right? For a library card, you can sign up there. So the language may need to be changed to reflect the reality of the fact that there are like outreach events. So you don't have to be here, you have to be, I don't know, in person with a librarian.
Yeah.
I guess, I don't know how to.
No.
Take the Capitol Library out in person. Or at a Capitol Library or at a PBL event, something like that.
Or to strengthen the entire sentence and just say that you get a library card through this process, like of presenting these two forms of ID.
Yeah, or you can maybe say they must present the ID to a library employee or something like that, and then take the actual physical place out and make it that's a human who works here.
We'll look at that language and kind of redo it to make it a little more clear. And to also include like contacting if accommodations or needing like you can't come in person. So we can add that and look at it. And so we'll look at that. The educator library card, adding that section about what constitutes as proof and adding that under the registering a library card account. Adding the educator proof at the bottom of that section and making a list, right? Is that my understanding?
Yes.
And then clarifying what type of institutions or who is able to get an educator card. Does that sound about right? Okay. Okay, perfect.
Do we feel comfortable with those recommendations? Are there any other items of note for you for the session, the other concerns that you feel that's consistent?
I like all this.
I have one question.
Yeah.
In your previous experience with educated artists, has there ever been an issue with these materials are going to be used with minors, but they are not they're not guardians. They're not being shared by guardians with minors.
Yeah.
Like when you work in a public school, there is a very defined relationship between the library, the library materials of a public school and the students. This is a little bit more amorphous because it is the materials of the public library. Students
and then the next year.
I haven't had issues from my experience. Also, ultimately, it's the responsibility of that educator. And so we're just providing the resources, and it's basically the responsibility of that educator as to what resources they're using. I personally haven't had issues. I've only had positive experiences with it and with educators using it. Because usually it is for class projects. So I've never come across that. I'm not saying it can't happen, but we would ultimately, like, that's the responsibility of the educator, and how to use that card is on them. We're just trying to provide resources.
I love the idea. I love the idea and the concept of an educator library. I think it could serve a lot of good. And the recommendations just for clearing up just the documentation you would need to provide in order to get one of those cards. I think that would be fair. It would take out a lot of the guesswork out for educators.
Yeah.
And it would take out a lot of the back and forth conversations that y'all might have to have with those folks.
Yeah.
So it could be clear and they can see it like, okay, cool, I know what to do. And then it just cleans up that process a lot more for you.
Yeah.
But I love the idea of the educator. I think it would be great.
Perfect. Yeah, I think we'll definitely add that section. I'm glad y'all caught that, because when you stare at a policy for so long, it's very difficult to, like, you start to stare at it and it's just like ingrained. It's like now it's a part of my brain. So fresh eyes is really helpful, and we definitely want to make sure that it's as clear as possible for anybody that's reading it. So we'll make some edits, make some changes, and try to definitely clear up some of the confusing aspects to this policy.
For some reason, in the middle of the night, somebody was, I think, maybe this would be helpful if it's worded this way. Can I just send it to you?
Yeah, just email
Look
me.
at?
Yeah, you can email me.
Under renewing parts, can we add a comma after use of phrase?
Let's see. Yes. Comment. Good. Comment.
And I'll have a quick comment to Morgan in your statement. If anybody has any recommendations on what language wants to over to Jessica, my request is don't copy the whole board so we don't have a walking forum. That's my one. There.
Y'all have a chance to look over the application.
I can't recall from the text share policy. Can a minor have a text share? Because we distinguish
Ooh.
youth and adult for resident and non-resident. Educator, I would never imagine a world where an educator is a minor.
Mm-hmm.
Text share, I could see that go one of two ways. And it could just be an item that we resolve by back to the statements before of please refer to the text share policy, which is take that can to that policy. But that just stands out in my mind immediately as a question.
I cannot remember if our text share policy allows minors to get a text share card, but I put a question mark. So I'll definitely look at that. And if it does, then we can always add that, like we do with the resident and non-resident cards, add that section or add that option.
Policy does.
Does it?
Current policy does. That's all minors, 18 and under must be accompanied by a small card in English. And then I was supposed to check that I was remember having read something. So I think part of the policy and procedure, there is an NDA statement that talks about to make things that we need to make sure and ensure that all patrons have access regardless, and then it doesn't say the name. Those here you can do pop back proxy. So you can do library cards, for proxies, for mail, second services, so you list several things. So I wonder if the point is, you know, you have the statement here, and I don't think that we have gotten to the statement to view it. Does that give you the right to make exception, right, instead of doing it in the policy? Because I don't know that we have done exceptions in any of the other procedures. And so then we're starting to deviate the process a little bit. I know the couple of procedures we mentioned for like the restoration of mutual right, right? But, and so I don't know if that's what we're considering, or is that part of the ADA statement? We go back to think we're gonna start looking different for this policy. There's the other ones that we have.
And I think we consistently applied the exception to the discretion of the library director, and throwing that in here to be consistent with other policies, give you and staff leeway as appropriate. And if we do have statements on ADA accessibility and compliance under one policy, and we intend to use that here too, it might make sense to just have that included in this policy. That way a patron's not flipping through 3 different sets of policy to see what does and does not apply.
So this is not part of the policy. I think this, remember when we got all the policies and procedures, it's just a statement. So it's a standalone like document. It's not attached to anything else. Reference it.
I think that was like a robust discussion. Do we feel comfortable? Do we have consensus? Do we have any other concerns that have not been articulated? Jessica, do you feel like we have given you enough thoughts and feedback to be productive with staff?
Yes, I feel these are good recommendations, and we will edit this, revise it with those recommendations, and then present it again in July. And it might also make more sense being presented with the circulation policy in general, so.
So if there's no other discussion, I would motion to table the library card policy until the July 2024. There's a motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, so we get down to the end of the agenda. We're down to the adjournment. Was there any other notes or comments from the floor?
I have a question. Is it possible that this will be your last meeting with us as interim director?
I'm not sure, but if we do get a director before the July meeting, I would ask and try to show up anyways, especially because I am still working on these policies and this project, and I definitely want to see it through. So I'm going to be here for the July meeting just because this is something I've been working on, and it just makes sense to see it through.
Absolutely. Well, I just wanted to like thank you and show you
Oh.
my admiration for the work that you've done in your
Thank
interim
you.
director role. A lot of great things have been accomplished.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. It's definitely been a learning experience, and I definitely am grateful that the staff was willing to kind of take on some of these projects with me. So thank you. Oh, thank you.
Yes, next meeting we're tracking as July 11th. Is that what we're all seeing? All right, we'll meet again on July 11th at 7 p.m. If there's no other items, is there a motion to adjourn? Okay, so the motion, is there a second? There's a second over there. Thank you, Mary. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, it is 7:45 and we are adjourned.